So, oh, Michael just entered the room. So look, this is great. We've got a few people from the Twitter feed. Um, if these names look familiar. I only invited the few people from the Twitter feed and a couple of my former students. One of them showed up and then took off before their camera came on. Maybe they're busy. One of my students. So, Angel.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Michael's on his way in. Did you recognize Michael from the thread? The name Michael? He doesn't.
Is that triad axiom, Michael?
Yeah, I think that's the, but you know what I was thinking, like some people are self-conscious about, doxing themselves. So I thought maybe we shouldn't mention people's Twitter handles. So like, you're Jen, you're Angel.
I'm Jen.
Etc. Oh, here comes Ellie. Ellie's on the way in, right? And maybe that's enough. But if somebody wants to give their own, but just let's not give anybody else's, because I don't want to be accused of orchestrating some kind of unintentional.
Oh man, no.
Thing. I don't know,
Hey, Rick, I have a few shirts with Ayn Rand quotes, but I couldn't find them. So I wore this shirt.
I like it.
You've posted that before.
Hey, Ellie.
Ellie.
Hey.
It's so early.
Wow.
It is. It's like 6 a.m. there, right?
Oh my God.
6 a.m.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna
6
be
a.m. I feel so bad. I
quiet.
picked this time because I thought it was.
It's actually
Pardon? What'd you say, Ellie?
the sun's not up.
Oh God. Yeah, maybe, like if I knew, how many of you from the same area of the world as Ellie? Any of you? No. Okay, so you're the only one suffering at this ungodly hour. All right, so like maybe next time I know that you're coming, I'll make it an hour or two later, Ellie. I picked this time because my two favorite Marks in the world, this one here and the other Mark that you all know, said, this time works great for me. So
we can do a 7 p.m. for the Eastern for the Australian contingent.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, then that would be what, 4 hours later. So that would be like 10 a.m. That's not so bad, Ellie, is it?
I'm at work though. Monday morning.
Oh.
Oh.
We'll figure it out. Well, I don't know if Mark Pellegrino is going to show up today, but Michael's trying to get in. He left and now he just came back. So if he's going to be, oh, there he is.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, hi, Michael. You might have to, can you unmute yourself, Michael? There you go.
There we go. This is my first Zoom call, so.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's not so bad, Zoom. It's a little tricky when you don't know your way around, but just for simple seeing and hearing, gets complicated when you start doing screen shares and, showing documents and all these other things that happen in meetings. But all we're going to do is just look at each other and chit chat. All right, well, look, thanks for showing up.
I appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for showing up. I've been saying that I've been planning on doing this for quite a while. And Mark, my co-host, podcaster from really it's his podcast, Level to Power. He knows I've been telling him this for over a year that I want to start doing this. But so this is like the first one, and I'm hoping to keep doing it. We might have to tweak the time for the folks down under. But, it's low tech, like when Mark LTP does the podcast, we do it in a studio. He gets them edited. It takes weeks to get them edited. He wants them just right. me, if somebody's screen freezes and the sound goes, I don't care. I'm just going to publish it the way it is. So there's no editing here. We're not going to cut anything out. I really want-
Content over form.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And like, if I really, get good at this, then, eventually maybe I'll improve the form and get better equipment. And like that headset of mine, you missed this, Michael, but nobody could hear me before because my headset didn't work.
I want to say hi to Jen, by the way.
Hey, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm only here so that I can be playing Michael in PokerStars.com. and then you ask him a tough philosophical question when he's in the middle of a big hand and I can win.
Is that-
poker
is this-
player? I see your hat.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So like, look, this is the first one. So like, the ground rules are that this is going to be very informal and loosely structured, and we should just all be nice to each other. And then like, we don't really need any ground rules. That's about it. If need be, I'll weave in and out as a moderator, but I like to participate. We've done this before. Well, Mark has done it. Mark was a moderator with the other Mark when, what's his name, Jeffrey and I debated this Kant thing. I don't know if you saw that. But like the two Mark moderators, they chimed in occasionally as participants, and it was hard to tell their role. And that's fine. Like, I'm the moderator. We have to have somebody moderate, but we could even rotate the moderating if people think, Rick, stop thinking you're the boss or something like that. Whatever. So yeah, what else? It's like some notes here. Oh yeah, I mentioned this earlier, Michael. Even like right now, everybody who's here is from pretty much the same group of Twitter threads. And there's been an issue there about people publicizing their identity publicly in connection with their Twitter handle. So I leave that up to you if you ever want to say, oh yeah, I'm, at level to power, that's me, and I'm Mark so-and-so, we shouldn't do that to each other. So just in case.
That's an interesting point. By the way, was that Mark Gleason, LTP that
Me.
showed?
I didn't want to say, yeah, he just
Oh,
admitted.
yep. Hey, how are you?
Here comes one of my former students and maybe
Yeah.
his co-host partner. Oh, good. Here he comes. There they are. Oh, that's Niaz with the beard, and Mike. Hey, you guys, Niaz and Mike, you got to unmute yourselves. Can they?
I can. We can.
Okay, good. There you go.
Maximize the screen. Hi, Professor.
Hi, Niaz. Don't call me professor here. Call me Rick. My former student, it's hard to break that habit.
That's like
Even
blasphemy.
when he comes over my house, because he happens to be very good friends with my daughter, keeps calling me professor.
Like superhero.
And that's Mike. And Niaz and Mike are co-hosts on a new podcast that they've recorded a few episodes, but they haven't published them yet because they want to clean up the website and get it perfect before they throw stuff out there. But that's the name of it, The Other Half.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, and Niaz and Mike, everybody here, except for you two guys, we're kind of Twitter friends in a group of overlapping threads that revolve around this philosophical topic that when you interviewed me on your podcast, you asked me, what's one philosophical belief I have? And I explained objectivism to you. So yeah, the objectivism is like one of the main things that holds that Twitter thread together. So just so you guys all know who each other is.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us here. We didn't want to show up right on time and not be fashionable. So thanks for having us. We're delighted.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I was just saying, this is very informal, and the only ground rules is like be nice. If need be,
I'll see myself.
if need be, I'll mute people and boot them off if they break that one rule.
That makes you the host.
Sounds good.
Yeah. What else? So I'd like these things to go for like 1 hour at least, and like 2 hours at most. But of course, that's just a general expectation. The purpose of this is just like philosophical discussion made easy for ordinary folks.
Which are us.
And that's me too. I just happen to be also a professional philosopher. Okay, so topics today, I didn't have any topics. I just thought we would just jump in and see if there was something we wanted to talk about. I thought of a couple if nobody has any ideas. One could be, oh wait, let me see if anybody.
Can I ask a question, Rick, before
Yeah,
you start?
good.
What's the difference? You had said something about doing a Socratic circle, or you had explained to me there was some way of functioning. We don't have to do that today. I just wanted to
So I
be.
will schedule one of those down the road. Maybe, and I'll only invite the people who do well in this format to come into that one. Because you
Everything
have to
makes
have
sense.
the right kind of intentions, because I'm going to be, inviting people to come back, different people and getting, whatever, former students and other friends and whatnot, to come to these things, and who knows who will show up. So, but over the course of time, yeah, I'd like to try this other thing. So that's a really interesting but complexly structured process that Mark is referring to. It's called Socratic Dialogue, but like ordinary Socratic dialogue is just people debating in the Socrates kind of way, where somebody asks a philosophical question and the other person gives an answer, and then the interrogator starts, interrogating that answer and, trying to come up with counterexamples. It's just ordinary philosophical exchange. But Socratic dialogue, like with two capitals, capital S and capital D, is this technique that philosophical counselors use. And all the participants are given a concept like a week in advance, at least, something like egoism or certainty or doubt or whatever the issue is, like emotion, right? All these little topics that we've been debating recently on Twitter, by the way, Niaz and
Mhm.
Mike. And then like you're asked to think of one example before you get there. And then, when we get there, each person will come up with their example of that concept in their lived experience, right? Whatever the concept is, whether it's free will or it doesn't matter, love, art, whatever, bullying, whatever the particular thing is, right? And then like, say maybe there's a dozen people and there's a moderator, and the moderator asks each person to briefly explain their experience with that concept. And we go around and we go around. The moderator takes little notes. And then afterwards, that's round one. Afterwards, everybody votes on which example they thought most paradigmatically, illustrated the concept. And the moderator will briefly remind everybody, okay, Jen's example was with the chocolate cake, that kind of thing. There's little things that will remind people what the example was, and then we'll vote, and then whichever one got the most votes, that person then becomes some kind of a temporary authority or spokesperson for that example. They embellish on the example, they go into it more deeply, and then they themselves say what they think the features of the example were, which exemplified the concept, right? And the moderator takes notes, and then once we get a kind of and then everybody else in the circle can then like kind of interview or interrogate that person, asking them questions to try to tease things out about the concept. And then we formulate a kind of working definition of the attributes of the concept that were illustrated in the example. Then next round, we go around and compare every other case. So suppose Ellie was the one that was chosen, but then we have her working definition that we all kind of worked on, but then we go back to Jen and Angel and everybody else and compare the definition with their case. And then we either modify the definition, or it's consistent with the definition, or we decide that case, that this person or that person's case isn't really a good example of the definition. So it's a kind of ongoing back and forth kind of reflective equilibrium between all the cases. By the time you're done going through all the cases again, now you've got a very complexly developed or tweaked definition that's consistent with most of the examples. It's rare that an example will be eliminated. Usually every example will modify the definition a little bit. Unless you got like a wise guy in the group who's purposely came with an example to foil the process. That's why intention really matters. That's why I said I'm only going to invite people to a Socratic dialogue that I think will really participate with the right kind of intention. it's worth talking about this because it'll be really fun when we eventually do it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask, you can go ahead and pitch your topics. I just didn't know if you were going to do that today or not.
No, I know, but I figured let me just explain it because it's a really interesting thing, and then those of you who know about it, who want to be a part of it, will come back for that one when I announce it. But once that group definition has been formulated, then everybody does what Socrates normally does and tries to come up with counterexamples and whatnot to the final definition and see if it survives philosophical conceptual analysis. And, you know, it may actually reach consensus. And so what's interesting about that the process itself is that some folks in the Twitter feed that we, you know, objectivists, I don't know if it's objectivists or positivists, but I've heard many people, I know this is a kind of objectivist idea. So yeah, maybe all of the objectivists think that there's no such thing as collective learning, right? So each person is learning in that process, but benefiting from, you know, everybody else's contribution, but you either have to accept or reject it. So it's interesting. A group can work, it's like kind of distributed cognition in a way, but each person is still autonomous. And, you know, there's no imperative about reaching consensus. And sometimes these dialogues will end saying, just, you know, no consensus. It's a problematic concept or whatever. So it's a really interesting thing. I've done it with my students when I had a 3-hour class, because you need a long time, like the Saturday morning class or something. You need like 2-3 hours easily for something like that. If not, some people spend a whole weekend on these philosophy retreats in Socratic dialogues. All right, so sorry about that.
I could make a joke about that, but I'm not going to. I don't want to be one of those wise guys. So.
No, that's okay. We like humor here, Mike. Is Mike okay, or is it Michael?
Either one's fine.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
May I still not call you professor if it still feels like a class?
Sorry.
I'm kidding.
I was lecturing a little bit about Socratic dialogues. You got me, Niaz.
He prefers Gilligan in his private life, you know, professor or Gilligan. Either one.
Yeah. When I was a cross-country tractor trailer driver using the CB radio, my friends used to tease me, and they gave me this handle of the professor, and then everybody would tease me about Gilligan and Marianne and all this kind of stuff. All right.
Does Mark call you little buddy?
Not yet, but now I think you might have just given him an idea.
And thus a new nickname was born.
So does anybody have a topic you guys want to talk about today?
Well, I don't know how much of a topic this is, but when I look at Mark's shirt and it says science on there was something I saw today. I was reading an article, and this idea, I only saw the science part. I like it. This idea of falsifiability.
Oh.
I've always struggled with that. And in the article that I read, well, first off, is this a topical discussion, or is it more of a kind of a current events discussion with philosophical kind of applications? Like, is there, like, what is your vision of, you know, these Zoom meetings?
Yeah, I'm open to having random topics, philosophical topics, current event topics, but, you know, mostly I like the idea of philosophical discussions.
Okay, well, so when I read this article, they talked about falsifiability, and they used an example of something like all poisonous, maybe a hypothesis that all snakes are poisonous, but then that you falsify it because there's another snake that you find that's not poisonous, which I thought that you would falsify the initial claim, right? You would, well, so that is falsifying it, but you know, I know that in the Twitter thread, there was some discussion about swans, all swans are white, etc. And is falsifiability just another way of saying an untestable hypothesis? I guess it was a question that I wasn't sure if that was synonymous, because I understand the idea of an untestable hypothesis. Religion might be an example that I would apply that. Although I know, religionists might disagree with that, but I would view that as an untestable hypothesis. And is that the same thing as being unfalsifiable?
We could talk about that for a while, and we could shift to something else too if that plays out quickly. Anybody want to answer that question? I could answer it, but I don't want to be professor.
Well, can we clarify the question? So that we're trying to make a distinction between what is not falsifiable or unfalsifiable, and what is a hypothesis?
No, so I'll try to clean that up. So the idea that I'm struggling with is falsifiability just as a concept. It pertains to science. It's a test for not something being true or false, but something being scientific. And so the idea of falsifiability, my understanding is that in order for, when I first heard this, and when I first heard the description that, something had to be falsifiable, it made me think, okay, so that means that only things that aren't true are scientific. That obviously can't be right. So what do people mean when they say something is falsifiable or unfalsifiable, rather?
Well,
I can give an example if you want, just to help. But Mark, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the power of any theory is in its ability to predict the future, right? So we have a theory that explains something, and you can make a theory which we won't know until the end of the universe and beyond whether it's true or not, and that's just not very useful, right? So I think that there is you need to have a category for those. Like I have this theory of this is how things work. There's no way to prove it either way. It really doesn't make a difference either way. And there's like that one category of theory. And then there's the category of theory that says, I have this theory about how the world works, and the power of this theory and that you can predict what it's going to be. I mean, evolution is a good example, right? So the power of evolution is to say, I'm going to dig in this place and I'm going to look at the soil strata, and I'm never going to find a Precambrian rabbit, a rabbit in the Precambrian layer. And if I do, then that will turn my entire theory on its head. And that happens sometimes, right? But so I'm making this theory, and these people say, okay, well, how do we test this theory to see if it's useful or not? So you have this, I mean, to me, I just have this range of theories, and some of them are testable, some of them are not. The non-testable ones are kind of just like hypothetical conjecture that can never be proven either way. It doesn't really matter. And then the ones that can be tested, I can say, here's the criteria. And the more rigorous the criteria, the more powerful the theory, right? The more I box myself in, and I mean, I follow a lot of stocks, biotech type stocks. And when you go to the FDA or your regulatory agency, and you make your case for why your drug should be approved, you need to have a working understanding of, I'm going to give somebody a drug, and this is how it's going to work in their body. And this is how I know I'm right, and this is how you're going to know I'm wrong. And the FDA will gauge this theory based upon the power of your model and the power of your theory to play out in your trials, right? So I had a theory. And so if I had just said, well, I have this theory, and in 18 generations from now, you're going to see an impact, right? Well, it's kind of like a non-falsifiable theory, therefore just not useful. It's still a theory, and maybe it's correct theory, but it's just not really useful. And the idea of our theories is to be able to build a model of how the world works and then predict things. And the better you can predict things, the better off your model is. So to me, the more rigorous your falsifiability, the more useful your hypothesis in the real world, and your more usefulness at predicting the future.
Okay, so would you say then that falsifiability and a testable hypothesis, is this almost synonymous?
To me, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Certainly very adjacent to each other.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was thinking of an example of like Mark's theory. Mark's example was practically unfalsifiable, but maybe in the 19 generations later or something, that thing that he used that example, maybe something would then be provable or falsifiable, right? So
I was giving an example of life of the universe is completely unfalsifiable. 19 generations from now is it is falsifiable, but to the point where it's not really useful in our
Right, it's practically unfalsifiable for our purposes, right? But I wanted to give an example of something that's conceptually unfalsifiable. Bertrand Russell, famous mathematician and philosopher, his example was, it's conceivable, it's hypothetically possible that God created the world 5 minutes ago with all of our memories, fossils, everything in place. And because God is all powerful and all knowing, he would know how to do that in a way that we could never tell that the world was really only 5 minutes old. Now that's conceivable, but it's not falsifiable, right? By definition, it's built into the hypothesis that an all-powerful, all-knowing being could have designed the entire universe with a whole fake record of its going back to the Big Bang, you know, all of your childhood memories, all of that, and just hit the go button 5 minutes ago, and there'd be this seamless thing that 5 minutes ago, it just seems like the same as 5 years ago, and you know, and so on, all the way back. There'd be no way to falsify that hypothesis, right? So what the scientific attitude is, what was his name? Karl Popper, who's the one I think who really pushed the idea of scientific theories are restricted to those that are falsifiable. If you can't even imagine test conditions under which you could falsify a theory, right? It's falsifiable, but then it's cognitively meaningless. It makes no difference in your knowledge. And I would say that the brain in a vat hypothesis, you know, the possibility that you're a brain in a vat hooked up to a supercomputer, like a matrix kind of thing, that's virtually unfalsifiable. So is the claim that you're a simulated being in some future world, you know, that runs these simulations so well that the avatars in them are conscious and feeling what they're indistinguishable from us. That's also unfalsifiable in theory, because anything that you could point to as evidence for or against that, it is something that could happen if you were a simulated being, or if you were a brain in a vat, or if the world was 5 years old, right? So philosophers call those kinds of global, unfalsifiable hypotheses evidence transcending hypotheses, right? They're hypotheses that have no bearing whatsoever on any evidence. So no evidence can confirm or disconfirm them, so they can't play a role in our cognition. They're meaningless. So skeptics have fun playing with these unfalsifiable hypotheses, like what if this and what if that, and how do you know this and how do you know that, right? But like none of those hypotheses are cognitively meaningful in any way, shape, or form. They wouldn't make any difference whatsoever to our lives in the real world with our knowledge. You know, it's possible you could imagine that one of them might be true, but that the mere fact that you can imagine something as true doesn't mean that there's any reason whatsoever to think that it's true, especially if nothing could ever evidence it. So our only reason for thinking anything is true or for doubting anything is based on evidence. So that's
it's like a Schrodinger's cat argument, I guess.
Yeah.
Like maybe something's there, maybe it's not, you know, type thing. I've seen those kind of threads run in circles too, where one person presents a really out there argument, and then the other person tries to top them with an even more out there argument, and that it's kind of like Ripley's Believe It or Not after that. Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, you know, I like that example because I'm always kind of dislodged a little bit by things like Schrodinger's cat, you know, quantum physics and everything. And I think that people who bring them up just because they have that effect on you. So like, but here's my answer to it. Like, not only is, I mean, there may be some way that, you know, if they're going to start appealing to double slit experiments and things that I really don't understand, like our friend Rick Ballin, you know, he's going to come on here soon, I would imagine, and talk about his harmonics theory.
That's way over my head.
It's over my head. Yeah, it's over my head. But here's my answer to these esoteric claims. They constitute, or they involve, maybe not intentionally, I don't know, I'm not going to do motive whispering, but motive whispering is a great topic for one of these podcasts. It's something like question begging. So if you make a claim, right? Which is in doubt. I'm like, I don't believe that. What's your evidence for that? And then you appeal to something like Schrodinger's cat or Rick Ballen's, incomprehensible, quantum formula, something or other, with, Pythagoras, universal weirdness to it. Like, you're begging the question. Let me make an analogy. The premise should not be more questionable than the conclusion. If your premise is more in doubt than the conclusion, then it's not supporting the conclusion of your argument. So suppose I say, I know astrology is true. And you say, how do you know? And I say, the aliens told me, right? Like, so my premise is even more doubtful than the conclusion. That's a form of begging the question. Even though it's
Yeah.
not circular, it's kind of like circular in terms of the lack of evidential support. The support is in need of more support than the conclusion. It's worse than a circular argument. Circular argument just says X. How do you know? Because of X, right? They might disguise that, like, Jane is suicidal. How do you know? She has a tendency to try to take her life. Well, that's synonymous. That's not evidence. If you show me cut marks on her arms and stuff like that, then you've established that she is suicidal because you have.
I think it's kind of what Mark Gleason was talking about was the level of specificity. And then if you can measure it, is it measurable? And maybe that's a little bit too strict as far as this is how I'm going to support my argument. But that's kind of what I was hearing as far as we're going to, if there was a medical drug that said we're going to reduce tremors by 50%, and it's going to happen within this time frame. It seems like that's the more supportive, you get more interest in that and more approval.
Yeah, scientific hypotheses like H, when we simplify this to analyze the logic, H is for the hypothesis, and then the arrow is an if then, right? If the hypothesis is true, arrow, observation will occur, right? So if the hypothesis that Mark said is that, within a certain period of time, 50% of people will have this thing, it'll change. That's the observation, that the hypothesis predicts a certain observation. If H, then O. If the hypothesis is true, then we will observe certain results. And then we either do or we don't. If we don't observe what the hypothesis predicts, that falsifies the hypothesis. If we do observe what the hypothesis predicts, that's some evidence for the hypothesis. It's not necessarily proof.
The Schrodinger's cat thing made me laugh, and I'm sending something in the chat right now, and this is similar to that. This is the philosophical version of that, I think, and this is Sagan's dragon, right? And it's just a useful little story to have in mind sometimes, particularly on Twitter threads. And that is, someone makes a claim. This is Carl Sagan, right? Who's trying to explain why you need to have evidence and falsifiability. And he's saying, someone makes a claim, there's a fire-breathing dragon in my garage. Guys, I sent it to you guys so you could read it. And you say, great, show it to me. And you go out in the garage and it's empty. And they go, well, my dragon's invisible. And you say, okay, well, let's put some flour on the floor. We'll see their footprints. Oh no, my dragon floats. Okay, well, let's use some infrared cameras. Maybe we could detect it that way. No, it's a heatless dragon who breathes heatless fire, right? And so every single time you try to box in this concept, they just go, they just change the parameters a little bit to move one step further, one step further, one step further. So, and then of course, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, I think is one of his quotes as well. It's certainly true. So it is kind of like, it's a Schrodinger's dragon, if you will, right? So it's this thing out there, because it's not falsifiable, then you're really not making a claim at all, in my opinion, right? Like I can kind of say something and you're like, well, yeah, but how would you know that's true? I go, I don't know, right? like I had a friend of mine who actually said to me at one point, I think we don't even need medicine. I think if you're in the right mindset, you can just heal yourself. And that's why I do this. That's why I do this. So I don't get sick or anything. And I said, last year you were in a motorcycle accident and you went to the hospital and got a cast on your leg. And he's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, so doesn't that disprove this? He's like, no, it doesn't disprove it. I just wasn't in the right mindset. So anyway, every time I would try to box him in and say, okay, well, you have a working theory. Let's try to understand it. How can we test this and see whether this is true or not? And of course, that's the last thing in the world he wanted to do. He wanted to have a belief without any kind of bounding to it whatsoever. And so that of course lacks any usefulness, even if he's correct, right? Even if you come to me with some wild theory, like, we don't need to sacrifice a virgin in spring to have a good crop. We just need to make sure we like put cow manure in the dirt. And I'm like, well, how can we prove this or not prove this? And you're like, I don't know, it doesn't, the power of the theory is in your ability to bound it with falsifiability and then prove time and time again through these gates that your theory holds water, and it's really predictive of our universe. Anyway, so keep that story in your back pocket. And believe me, on Twitter, every single time you're in debate and they just move the goalpost, don't get sucked in like I do all the time. And turn back around and say, look, it's not for me to bound in your claims. You are responsible for making a claim that makes sense. I don't need to produce evidence to disprove your crazy theory. You need to prove positive evidence that your theory is somewhat correct and we can all evaluate it together.
But the fact that that happens on Twitter, or your hypothesis that even happens on Twitter, is that falsifiable? Oh, I'm just kidding. Of course that happens on Twitter.
Sure, it's very falsifiable. It's
Well,
an
we've all
empirical
observed
question.
it.
It's an empirical question, which can be falsified. Absolutely. And by the way, falsified in the next 5 minutes. So
Right. Short attention span.
Yeah, I forget where I read this in one of these critical thinking textbooks, I think, that I used years ago. I think it's called How to Think About Weird Things. Michael Shermer, the skeptic, by the way, he's one of the authors, I think, of that book. And there's some co-author, I forget the other guy's name. I think it was in that book where the claim is, oh, Zelda is psychic. And then like the other person says, well, how come she was incapable of reading my mind? And the Zelda supporter says, people with doubting thoughts jams her thought waves.
now the opposite end of that's the old faith healer trick, right? The opposite end of that is that old comedian line, who here is telekinetic, raise my hand. Immediately falsifiable.
About how sports fanatics have their own traditional way of hoping that their team was going to win that particular day or for the season, and they have these particular guidelines of wearing the same jersey, making sure that they make the same meal, making sure that they have this anthem played out, whether they go tailgating or whatever, and they hope to win in that particular fashion. But it's not proven that it actually works.
That's a really good example. It makes me think about like confirmation bias too. Like a lot of us have beliefs that might be analogous to those sports beliefs. And like we think that, oh, they won, my team won, right? So like, I think it's true, see, because I had that shirt on. But like we tend to discount the times that they lost, even though I had the shirt on. Maybe I forgot to have my hot dog or whatever it is, and we like find excuses to explain away the counter evidence. That's confirmation bias. And we do, I think, we're all guilty of that.
Which does exist, by the way. I know.
Pardon?
Some have made the claim that confirmation bias does not exist.
Who made that claim?
Several people on the Twitter thread made the claim.
Oh, really?
They're skipping the parts that disproved it.
What was that?
I said they're skipping the parts that disagree with them.
That's exactly right.
Well, Mark has played online poker, as have I, and you will sometimes. Luck is a factor in the game. You want to win by skill, but ultimately, in the short run, luck can play a big role. And there are times when you get it in with the best hand. I'm talking about Hold'em. I don't know. I think you're more of a stud player.
I do all. But...
Yeah. You might get it in with the best hand pre-flop against the second best hand. And of course, those roles will be reversed just as easily. And the second best hand wins. And somebody thinks that I always lose, how did you make that call? You should have, whatever. So the idea is that, people don't remember all of the times, with the best hand in that scenario will win 80% of the time. But they only remember the 20% time when they lose, and they don't realize that the 20% of the time they're making the right decision, which is all that really matters in the long run, is that you're making the right decision. So.
Yeah, and that is a function of how the human brain works, right? The human brain uses emotion to decide what it should remember, right? And so, because if a fly goes past you, you don't care, but a tiger leaps out at you from the jungle, you're terrified, and your brain says, "I should remember this information for the future." So that's where, you know, post-traumatic stress comes in, where you were under extreme terror and your brain decided to remember it forever. So it's funny though that, yeah, when people lose, people go both ways though. They'll either overweight the ones they lost or overweight the ones they won. And poker as a game wouldn't exist without it, because, you know, otherwise it would be very clear who won and who lost. You know, poker is a fulcrum, is a crucible, which really wrings out all of your personal issues, because, you know, there's no doubting the reality of the cards. The cards, you know, don't care what you think. Much like science, cards don't care. It's all probabilities. And so people bring all of them, their own, you know, emotional issues to the game. I was in a home game for years where I consistently won pretty much every time. And there's only 4 guys or 5 guys. So you should be able to figure out, this guy won 20, he won 80, he lost 10, therefore Mark won 140. But you never could figure that out, because everybody always kind of inflated their winnings and minimized their losses, right? And so it was impossible to figure out actually who was winning, only because everybody was always like, "Oh yeah, I did pretty well. I only lost $20." Meanwhile, I walked away with $500. Clearly, somebody is. But that's how it is. It's you know, we avoid painful ideas, and we just need to safeguard against that, because we know that about ourselves, right? So that's why you have a scientific method, because, you know, I really want this experiment to succeed. So I'm emotionally vested in it, in the outcome. So I can't even be sure I'm not doing little subconscious things as experiments show us. Like, for instance, the person giving surveys, you know, the way they ask the question, right, can lead the respondent to answer differently.
Yeah, that actually, you know, makes me think, you know, there's a right answer to each question and a wrong answer, but I'm more concerned with sort of this intentionality of, you know, there are certain people who they want to know the right answer, even if it's not, even if it's painful. And then there are, you know, people who, you know, they maybe subconsciously, you know, shield themselves from, you know, knowledge that maybe, you know, conflicts with, you know, things that they've believed all their lives, etc.
If your beliefs are wrapped up in your sense of identity, then you feel under threat when that belief is questioned, right? So if I say, "Hey, do you like corn chips versus potato chips?" and you don't really care about that, then you're fine. When I question some other belief and you say, "I am this, I am a Christian, I am an objectivist, I am a rational person," and if you're going to, you know, somehow question something, you're not debating my idea anymore. You're now attacking me, is how it feels to me. You aren't attacking me, you're just debating an idea. But yeah, and that's, you know, we all do it. We all have to be on guard for it, because we all, no matter how hard we try, I try very hard, right, to keep an emotional distance between who I am and what I believe. But you know, we internalize a lot of that, and we can't help it, and therefore we get offended when people innocently question things about ourselves.
Actually, that's a good point, because I heard recently that if somebody makes a point and your immediate reaction is like a defensiveness, if you really want to introspect, that's a good thing to kind of focus on and evaluate. And yeah, you know, like I'm taking this leadership class and it was talking about the top 10 qualities of leaders. And I'm like, oh yeah, I identify with that, and I identify with that. And then it said, also, if you're not organized, you're like a, you know, it was like this horrible statement. And I got so defensive. And it's because, well, yeah, I need to focus on my organization. Don't be defensive about it. It's telling you a thing that obviously is true, like not horrible like it made it out to be. But I was like, okay, instead of being defensive about that, it's telling you something.
I think it's really important with debates not to fall down the rabbit hole, like to have a certain amount of time that you'll be willing to devote to the thread. But when it starts going over that and getting into your me time or your mental health or getting you too upset, it's important to be able to walk away from it, I think, when it starts getting a little bit too much, you know, and people start, you know,
It does get very personal, doesn't it?
yeah, trying to get you to, like, somebody will say, well, this person's a terrible person because they believe so and so. And you find yourself trying to defend your own character, not defending ideas, but defending your own character. And that's kind of, what some people try to get you to do on threads. And I think that's a good time, to, make your escape, right?
It does kind of go back to just conflating that ideas with your identity, right? That
Yeah.
if you believe something, that's who you are. Yeah, so like it is about getting some emotional distance from that, being able to like examine an idea, whether it's right or wrong. That doesn't reflect on whether you're a good person or a bad person.
Sure. Love your accent.
Anyone can take it out of context, depending on how the words are kind of phrased. Is it not correct? Like for this is like an HR instance. If anybody is familiar with Friends, Joey Tribbiani, the way he says how are you doing, it can come out in different contexts. So if you say it normally, it could be very subtle. If you say it the way Joey says it, it could be an HR scenario. If you scream at somebody with it, it also can seem as context. But when it comes down in words, you don't know how you're reading it. You don't portray it the way you imagine the words are seeing it as. So I believe it's just out of how you know the other party, the respect, the possible.
Good example. Yeah. Hey,
Especially on Twitter, which is just text only, and the way people interpret tone and intention.
Yeah, and the first thing you can say is, why do I have energy about this topic, right? It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't, you're not making yourself wrong. You're not making them wrong. But when some stranger says something and all of a sudden you feel energy about it, you have to ask where that's coming from, right? Because you don't know this person, but what do you have at stake in this conversation? And again, it doesn't mean that what they're saying is correct. It just means that you need to evaluate. If you don't know them, you're bringing all your history here, right? And so if you were in some really, I don't know, I gave the example the other day where if you grew up in some kind of mafia family or you were in prison or something like that, where small insults could mean death, like you were in a gang, and small insults to your character or someone lying about you could get you killed. It could get your family killed. Someone call you a liar is a good example, or a traitor or something, right? If you're in a gang and someone calls you a traitor and that gets around, you could die. So let's say you're out of that now. You're a little bit older. You're out of your gang, but you're 5 years later. You're working in the corporate world. You're in a meeting with me, and and somebody calls you a liar or a traitor. Because of your background, right, your brain is programmed to think this is a personal attack that could get me killed, even though it's not, because now you're in the corporate world where that no longer matters. So we all bring our personal histories to these situations, and we may be applying or misapplying given the current situation, right? And so whenever I feel myself welling up with some energy about something, be it anger or insult or frustration or whatever, I kind of have to stop and say, wow, what is at stake here for me? Why am I reacting? These are just words somebody's telling me. Maybe they're wrong. Why am I reacting in this way? And you learn a lot about yourself.
It's quite interesting to examine that. I think you can learn a lot more from your own reaction as well, besides theirs.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say part of what Angel was talking about. So like sometimes I have felt that too, like when somebody gets so invested and brings so much negative energy into a thread, I kind of go, what's the deal? Like, because to me, one of my highest values is just like inner peace. And if somebody threatens that inner peace, then it makes sense for me to remove myself. That kind of threat is over. But that's one of my highest values. Somebody else might have a higher value than their internal peace. And that's why they don't disengage, because there's something else that they're pursuing that they haven't achieved yet. And that's part of why I asked in that big thread, why are you all here? What is the value that you're getting out of this thread? I was kind of disappointed that I didn't get very many replies. I'm genuinely curious.
That's a great point. We're all here for different reasons, right? Honestly, going back to the poker example, I'm there, let's say, to make money. Someone else is there just to have a friendly time. Someone else is there to get away from their their wife who they don't like anymore. And everybody's there for different reasons. And they're all bringing those different reasons to the table. And that colors how they see everything. And your point is exactly how it is for Twitter, right? Like, I believe I'm there to kick around some ideas and sharpen my rhetorical tools and, learn. I like being challenged, even with nonsense arguments sometimes, because it forces me to defend it. And in a way that I never had to defend my ideas before, and therefore it makes me better. But if somebody's mad at the world and looking to kind of take that out on somebody, right, then that's what they're bringing. And so everybody's kind of bringing these different things. You're there for harmony, or you're there to connect with people and achieve personal harmony, or whatever it is that you're bringing. And certainly that colors everything we say, and certainly it colors how we interpret everything that happens. Like for me, the moment someone starts departing from what I feel is the core task on the thread, which is the sharing and debating of ideas. Whatever my primary agenda was, it immediately changes to, oh, there's a bully. Let me debate them now. But that's why understanding is so important, right? Because I don't know where you're coming from. I don't.
I thought of Rick's inner peace. Rick, when someone mentioned inner peace gendered, I thought of Rick.
Nope, still don't hear you.
My connection has frozen a couple of times in the last minute. Did anybody ask me a question that I didn't answer or something? Frozen again.
And maybe that topic could come up someday.
Well, I'm having bad luck with my connection.
Yeah, so Rick is so the interesting thing about Rick is that he is a Buddhist scholar who has written entire books, several of which I own, on Buddhism and meditation and everything else. I very often will make the mistake when I'm referring to Rick somewhere, and I'll say, well, yeah, Rick's Buddhist, Buddhist scholar, and I refer to him as a Buddhist, and he jumps in usually and corrects me and says, whoa, I'm a scholar. I'm not necessarily Buddhist. My position is much more nuanced than that. And
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but my screen is frozen.
That's how often I do it. I'll be like, oh, yeah.
Well, you can predict the future. That's nice. Sam Harris would be another example where he's talked about, Buddhism, but not, the more of the spiritual or, meditative aspect, and not necessarily the religious aspect of that.
My screen froze a few times in the last 2 or 3 minutes, so I might have missed some of this conversation. I heard something about me not being a Buddhist and Sam.
So Rick, the question just was on. I said, yes, I'm always referring to you as a Buddhist, even though you are actually a Buddhist scholar and something different. So you can explain for yourself what that is.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't freeze up on me in the next minute or so. But one thing I know right now is that I have to get a better Wi-Fi. I recently upgraded, but it's not enough because it keeps freezing on me, and we can't have that on a recorded podcast. So I can't go as low tech as I wanted to go. It just won't work. Yeah, I mean, I actually am a kind of quasi or almost Buddhist. I've been practicing Buddhist meditation for like something like 48 years or something like that. Started when I was a kid, and I am a scholar of it and all of that. But there are certain, metaphysical beliefs and claims in Buddhism that I don't accept. Like the main one is the most important one that I don't accept, and that is the claim that there's no self. There's dispute among Buddhists about whether or not that claim is supposed to be taken literally or in some other sense. And I always say, if it's meant to be taken seriously at all, it better be in some other sense, because if it's meant literally, it's self-refuting in a way.
Yeah, if it's meant literally, you're not even allowed to say who made that claim.
Yeah. I mean, Buddhists have all kinds of complex ways of trying to reply to those kinds of criticisms, and that's like a lot of the stuff that I write about. But yeah, so but basically I like Buddhist practices. I love the meditation practices, and I love all the stories. They have a lot of really rich ethical stories in Buddhism.
Rick's reasons.
They said hook him up with one of our Ethernet cables.
So let me ask everybody then, while we're waiting for Rick to come back. So Jen, maybe you could expand on what the things that you're looking for on the, well, I guess in any engagement, in this engagement, in Twitter, or anything else that you're doing. You said the inner peace. Maybe you could tell us a little more about what you're looking for out of your interactions, and maybe everybody could go and tell us.
Right. So, well, I don't necessarily look to the Twitter thread for inner peace, because that would be
That's good.
self-defeating. Just the inner peace is one of my values. But in that thread, I've made it very clear. It's actually really selfish, and I feel bad, but like, I'm there to pluck away people's knowledge, and how can I apply it to me? And some of the best things that have actually been very impactful to me came out of that thread. And the most recent one had to do with, we have our emotions, they're involuntary, and how to channel those emotions. And one of the people had suggested bringing the thoughtfulness as a companion to the emotion and finding balance in that. And I think as somebody who's diagnosed as bipolar and clinical depression, my emotions will really take me down sometimes if I let them. And I've had to spend a lot of time fixing that, and say fixing, but addressing that in a way that enhances my spirit. And so some of the concepts in there have been very, very relative in helping me just with my personal growth. And it's sort of, and I had asked you, Rick, the other day, like, what are some of the behaviors, what are some of the actions that you take in Stoicism? And one of the persons was like, why would you want to become a Stoic? I don't. I just want to glean some of these practices that help to build that kind of inner peace.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been struggling with all kinds of philosophers, like most philosophers that I've had to deal with professionally, in terms of interacting with them and debating and arguing. Like, I'm like you. The metaphor that I use is of a bee, and I take pollen from any kind of flower and I make my own honey. And I don't care what they're doing in other hives or what kind of honey they make. And, I live to improve myself, and wherever I'm going to get ideas that help me do that, I'm going to do that. And so, like, if Kant had some brilliant ideas, which he did, I'm going to use them. But if I mention Kant in that particular thread, all the
rotten
fireworks, the fireworks go off as if I've created some kind of, it's almost like an act of apostasy or something, like, leaving Islam or something, because the objectivists, they identify Immanuel Kant as one of the chief villains of modern philosophy. But, he had some brilliant things to say, not everything. Same thing with Ayn Rand, like, my friends most philosophers don't like Ayn Rand, and I love Ayn Rand, but like, I don't accept everything that she says. You know, I take a lot of it because I like, you know, most of her philosophy, but, you know, oh, well, you know, she could care less about the poor, you know, whatever. Like, no matter which side it is, there's people on the other side saying, how could you accept the ideas of X? You
Right.
know, and it's like, well, a lot of their ideas are good. Just because they have other ideas that I don't like doesn't mean I'm not going to take what works. But the philosophers are like that too, not just people in the thread. Philosophers are like that. Like, you have to be a Kantian or a Randian or an Aristotelian, you know, a Platonist, or, you know, Nietzschean. You know, either you're with Wittgenstein or you're against, you know, this kind of thing. It's so stupid to me. It's so stupid to me that philosophers whose primary activity in life is analyzing concepts don't get that. Like, most of the objections that have ever been leveled against any paper I ever gave anywhere came from people who have this kind of, what is it called? Like, yes or no, you know,
Purism.
dualist. Yeah, it's like dualistic or categorizing, you know, crazy.
Rick, when you froze, I asked everybody to go through and tell us what it is that they're seeking to get out of this exchange, and also the Twitter or their other social media exchanges. And Jen had just told us hers. And by the way, what I get out of the Stoics, Jen, is what Rick said, which is accept what you can change. I mean, accept what you can't change, and then focus on the rest, right? So that's the key to Stoicism, and I would highly, highly encourage you to do that, given what you're trying to achieve. Miss Angel, would you be happy to go next in the what you're looking to get out of this exchange and the social media?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've just never been happy with like an all or nothing, black and white, you know, very boring way of looking at things. I like to just experience what other people think, experience other ways of life or other points of view. And I just don't find it threatening, the idea that somebody else believes something different than I am. If anything, I find that like intriguing to know what other people think. And you know, I wish that there were more threads where people could just, you know, sit down and talk about what their points of view are without making it into a war, you know. And I'm really interested in discourses where people can approach big important topics from a very, you know, peaceful, respectful kind of way. I think that's why I like the Rand podcast on YouTube, because so many of them are so in depth into ideas without people like, you know, attacking each other and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, that's great, and that's exactly what I want too, right? You know, and Rick, and I think also all of us really, just be able to exchange ideas. Don't be offended by them, right? Just understand how other people think. I'm a student of human nature. I was just telling somebody the other day, I like actually Mark Pellegrino. I was just telling him that you know, Sons of Anarchy is not being in a motorcycle gang. The show Sons of Anarchy, right? It's just the closest I will ever be to being in a motorcycle gang, and in that environment is fascinating to me, right? It doesn't, I don't agree with it. I'm not starting a gang tomorrow, but it is interesting to me because it's part of our human experience, and it's the closest I can get to it without joining a gang myself. So I'm a student of human nature, and that's how I view these threads or these interactions. You don't have to agree with everybody, but look, maybe they have a different way of living, which I can benefit from, right? I can learn something from. So I feel the same way. I'm just going across my screen left to right. Miss Ellie, you are next. So what are you looking to get out of these exchanges?
Okay. Probe into why they think what they think, because when I can discover that, it actually helps me crystallize what I think. And so quite often I think I start to ask people questions and they're not quite sure why I'm doing it, but that's the reason. It's because I want to know, how did you come to think this outlandish idea that I totally disagree with? Why do you think this way? It's really instructive. So I guess for me, it's it's inquisitive.
Sometimes people come off with some, I believe in this particular whatever, version of Christianity that the world's only 5,000 years old. And so I ask questions and say, okay, well, how would you reconcile this? Why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? And I love it when people just respond to me and say, oh, well, this is why I believe this, versus get all offended and say, why are you attacking me? One of my very good friends is a young earth creationist, and we've debated for 20 years on the topic. And it's fascinating to me how he's very smart, but we start from different assumptions, and he built an entire worldview different than mine. It's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. As long as your view or somebody's view is consistent of themselves, you've done a lot of intellectual work to make your own view consistent.
Here
I find
comes
that
Mark
fascinating.
Pellegrino.
Yeah, well, I met somebody who's into horoscopes and astrology and that kind of thing. And oh, Mark Pellegrino joined us.
Yeah, he just got here. Hey, Mark.
How are you? You got my note, right?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. Once I started this, did you? What was the note saying? I'll be late.
I was going to be late. Yeah, I had a
Yeah, no
business
problem.
call I had to take care of. What did I miss? Anything exciting?
Well, no, I think do you know everybody here? There's Jen and Angel and Michael and Ellie from the thread. And of course,
Cool.
there's Mark and me. And those are my, that's the two guys in the same screen, the fellow with the beard and the mustache. That's my former student, Niaz. And
Hey,
that's his co-host friend, Mike. And they're starting a new podcast also that they recorded some stuff with me and others recently, but they haven't opened up their website yet. But that'll be out soon. It's called The Other Half. And of course, they're going to want you on there someday, Mark.
The Guardian project is already on our site as
Oh, that's right. Yeah, when they interviewed me, I talked all about the Guardian project.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
They'll
you
be
for paving
posted.
the way.
Yeah.
Sorry
So
to interrupt.
yeah.
Go
No, you're
ahead.
not interrupting. What we talked about a lot of different things, and we just kind of going free form and just one conversation rolling into the next. But I don't know who started it, but I think Mark Gleason has been kind of leading an inquiry into why each of us, or what each of us expect and want from like that Twitter thread, and what we might want from like this podcast, kind of thing. And so,
Right. So we left off on Michael. Michael was about to enlighten us as to what he is seeking to get out of his interactions on social media and here, as well as his poker playing. I want him to throw that in as well.
Nice. Well, I would say for this these Zoom calls, I just think that there are people that have different perspectives than I do, and people that are smarter than I am, and I simply would like to kind of learn. The extent of my philosophical study has been, and this is really I admit this is problematic, but has been of objectivism, and so I have a pretty good handle on objectivism, and to the extent that it makes sense to me, I when I run across ideas, I can see where they're kind of juxtaposed, and it typically just reinforces that idea. And with Rick being on here and the students and the Marks and all of you guys, I just think that this is a good opportunity for me to just hear different perspective on different topics and different current events, whatever. In terms of social media, I use it really in a couple different ways. One way I use social media is to curate my own newsfeed, because for decades everybody's been talking about how the mainstream media is they're not journalists, they're activists essentially, and well, then do something about it. And I think with Twitter, as much as I may criticize them for some of their policies, etc., I think it's a wonderful way to curate your own newsfeed with people who are experts in different fields, and with different journalists who are covering different topics that I'm interested in, etc. And so I use it for that purpose. But then also I use it to rant because just my latest thing is the whole critical theory and all that, and the social justice and the in quotation marks and all of that, and just how I just think it's really trying to undermine the liberal order. And what I think is, you know, I know a lot of people here have been talking about the threads that were common, that we all have sort of talked on Twitter through these threads. I've actually become, you know, we talked about being able to just talk about ideas and it's okay to disagree. And I've found with, you know, the kind of culture wars that we have today, that I've found a lot of common cause with people on Twitter, not necessarily everyone that I know, but people that I follow, et cetera, that I would typically disagree with politically, for example, on a lot of issues, but we agree on free speech. We agree on individualism, although maybe not to the same degree. And I just think that's made me a little more, a little less black and white. You know, I'm willing to, I just think that it's important to take from people the things you disagree on and kind of work from there. And it's okay to not necessarily agree on everything. And two of my best friends, one of them is a devout practicing Catholic, and the other one is an evangelical Christian, and I'm an atheist objectivist. And they're a couple of the smartest people I know. And so I just think it's okay, and it's actually good to have different perspectives. So.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. I think we're all here. By the way, yeah, if you see the objectivist picture behind me, right? Mm-hmm. I have it. Was it the fountainhead, probably, right? But then over here, I actually have all the pictures from Philosophy Who Needs It. I think there's Capitalism, the Undone Ideal there. I have to hang that still. I have Atlas Shrugged over there on the wall. So I have all the, I got all the Ayn Rand accoutrement.
Nice.
Like a good capitalist. I got all the accoutrement. Well, very good. Look, I feel the same. You know, it's funny how when free speech was a given, we all were for it. Then we could kind of balkanize into little groups and argue about everything, right? Because free speech is a given. And all of a sudden, free speech gets put on the table as not necessarily a thing, right? Some people say, oh, no, we shouldn't have free speech. And you're right, it makes some strange bedfellows in some cases that you find yourself agreeing with, because you're all there huddled around the center going, I don't agree with a lot of stuff with you, but we all agree that we need some kind of liberal, small L society where at least we can talk about ideas. I mean, poor Mark Pellegrino, man, I just was this morning looking at some thread where, you're getting hammered for going on some podcast of some friend of yours because it's affiliated.
No, I was getting hammered for retweeting a podcast that my friend Chrissy does. Don't really give a fuck, to be honest with you. But they were making it like, my retweeting her was an expression of support for the Proud Boys. So I made it clear that it of course wasn't, and that this person was scandalous and a fucking lying sack of ass for trying to create the impression to the rest of the world that that's in fact what it was. That I just supported my friends, and I retweet my friends when I see them. I don't necessarily even look to the content too much to decide whether or not, should I? Politically, and I'm not going to endorse his politics, but if they're doing a charity event or interviewing somebody, fuck, yeah, sure. Even if that person is someone I disagree with, I'd promote it for them.
Well, yeah, there's like 3 degrees of guilt thing that they like to do now, where, you talk to the guy who talked to the guy who's with the girl who was, a racist or something like that. And people like God Sod are always like, look, I have anybody I want on my show and I debate them. Ideas need to be debated, even bad ideas, especially bad ideas, need to be confronted and debated, and there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah,
This person actually said, don't retweet people. I'm like, who the fuck are you, my mom? Don't retweet so and so. I'm gonna, what I said was,
She
I felt
hasn't
like
even seen it.
she's, yeah, I know, right? Well, I felt like saying, like, what are you, my mom? But I knew that wouldn't, get me many points. So I said, yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll be more mindful of what I retweet when you're mindful of what you're saying to people.
Yeah.
And when you retract your statement, and when you go out there and apologize for trying to ruin my reputation with your lies, everything I said was true. I did not say a single unfactual thing. Yeah, you decontextualize the facts and you associate it with something so that you're making a certain impression. You lying sack of ass.
And Gavin McInnes had stepped away from the Proud Boys a long time ago. I think it was started as a joke. They called themselves like chauvinists, so Western chauvinists, I think is what they call themselves. And
yeah, well, good luck stepping away from something harmless like that the left has dubbed to be, criminally insane, because you can never. It's like the Scarlet Letter, except it's branded into your skin. There's no escaping it.
Well, to complete our circuit here, and we'll come back to you last there, Mark. But if we go to the other half, guys, we are going through everybody, and they're talking about what they like to get out of this weekly call and what they get out of their other engagements. I guess you guys can add in what you're looking to get out of your podcast. The other half, I think, is probably the name of the podcast, I'm going to guess.
Yep.
So maybe you guys could both tell us what you're looking to get out of these engagements.
Yeah. So actually, Professor Rick Repetti has encouraged me several months ago, or almost 6 months ago, to follow through with this podcast. And Mike and we call ourselves two curious idiots, because we're genuinely inquisitive and interested in a lot of things that we don't understand. I think a lot of what Michael said earlier resonates with us. We try to speak with smarter people. Not always just smarter people, but just people from all walks of life that have different experience, and that they can share with us, and that we have not experienced or heard of, or have no knowledge of. It helps us with our understanding and picture of the world, especially one that is so divided day by day. I'm a firm believer on free speech, and as long as it's not hateful speech. And we both feel that it has divided us every day more and more so culturally, almost having a police state. So we wanted to give, not only create a platform for us to understand other people's points of view, but for other people to come on and share their points of view without being policed and monitored like it is on mainstream media. Whether you lean politically left or politically right, I feel like most people miss out on the other half of the story. And we wanted to, exactly what you said, Mark, that we wanted people to give them a platform where we can debate ideas, good or bad, but talk about them. And I think that brought us together, and we wanted to, not only inform ourselves, but try to, give others a way to, share their stories as well.
For me, it's more of like a project and experience. I followed these particular facts from Will Smith. He said in these lines, fail early, fail often, fail forward. Everyone is going to fail at some point, and if you're going to take it as a curve to better yourself and better the process, whether it's yourself in general or someone else. Somebody wants to lash out and say what they want to say. Yeah, they could have said it in a different way to not offend so much people. But if that was his objective, then kudos. He did it in a great, outstanding way. But for me, it's about bettering the process. Me and Niaz are absolutely idiots in the Twitter world.
Oh yeah, hell.
We have like one follower, and that's me signing up on the account. So hopefully we can get more, instructive notes and the way you guys communicate through Twitter and start following along and see if we can productive, get better on our end.
Well, that sounds great. You're going to fit right in with this motley crew already, I can tell. Mr. Pellegrino, I think you're last then. Actually, then Rick can go last, actually. But Mr. Pellegrino, so what are you looking to get out of this kind of weekly call? And what do you look to get out of most of your social media interactions that you do? I know you do a lot of podcasts and that kind of thing. Nice Reardon shirt, by the way. You're also a good objectivist capitalist. So what is it that you're looking to get out of your daily interactions?
Well, from calls like this, I could get clarity, I think, and confirmation of the truth, and then use that clarity to go out in social media and beat the fuck out of skeptics. But it's not just that hyper aggressive, toxic masculinity that I want to express out there in social media. It's I do think many of us who are objectivists, I'm assuming a few of us are here. I think we have the philosophy that has the right combination of elements to really make some positive change in the world, and it because it's been rejected by all the delivery mechanisms, or the people who run the delivery mechanisms for information, it doesn't have as wide an influence as it could if it were part of those delivery mechanisms. So social media gives us a little bit of a free form, even though the opposition to objectivism sort of controls it and limits the reach of it. It still also enables multiple objectivist platforms to be competing with each other every day, getting these ideas out there in the world instead of once a year conferences or tapes of lectures that would come out every couple of years. Now we have content every single day, and these ideas have a chance to compete against the skeptics out there, and I want to be part of that competition, and because I think we have the stronger ideas, I think we'll win. They have the institutional power and they could put us down, but that's the only way they will win, is by putting us down. So I want to be a part of that intellectual revolution that has to happen. And that's what I'm hoping to affect in my own little way, in whatever way I can. That's just a small dream.
Intellectual revolution. That's a good
right.
one.
Very good, very good. Well, so Mr. Repetti, could you close it, complete the circle here and let us know what you're looking to get out of these, since this is your brainchild, what are you hoping to gain? This is a group of objectivists. It's safe to talk about what your own self-interest is. I just want you to know you're in a safe place. This isn't the Buddhist one. This is the objectivist one, so you're okay.
Well, I fight with the Buddhists all the time about the primary belief that there's no such thing as the self. They all think I'm nuts. So I'm not afraid of, going against the entire herd, even when all their experts are there ready to try and knock me down. That's number one. But yeah, I've been talking about this, as you, Mark Gleason, know, for over a year, that I've been wanting to do something like this. It's kind of, I call this initiative Philosophy to the People. I've had it on my website for like 2 years now, that, I'm trying to do lots of things to just, bring philosophy back into ordinary people's daily discussions, reasoning, critical thinking. It's more about why you believe what you believe, not so much what you believe, getting people to analyze and think. And I think the average person on the street is, just as competent as anybody else. It depends whether you have a degree or you don't have a degree. You could be an idiot. And I've mentioned some degreed idiots before, who, I argue with them my whole life, who they just don't get it. They have this dichotomy way of thinking that you're either a Kantian or you're an enemy of Kant, Well, actually Kant had some good ideas and some bad ones. I keep the good ones and get rid of the bad ones, but like everybody out there has something to learn. This is the kind of Jain view, the Jains, those peaceful people in India.
Yeah.
The Jains have this view. It's called, I'll use the Sanskrit term, Anakantavada, and I forget what the breakdown is, but Vada means a doctrine or way of life. And this view is something like multiple like everybody's perspective on reality, everybody's situated in the perspectival center of their cognitive universe. No matter how diluted they are, they have some information that's valid. right? And Socrates believed this about people when he would interview the average person on the street, and he would try to get them to cough up the information that they had because he wanted to take it. Like Ellie or others here say, I just come to get I come to get what information and knowledge I can, right? So like everybody has something to give. And I think almost like I've often thought this about my students. Any one of them I ever talked to in my office, I thought that's an autobiography waiting to be written. You know, it's like everybody has some information that's useful. So this, one of my primary motivations here is to just get ordinary people to be doing philosophy, not in the classroom, but in real life. But I also have all the other motives that everybody else mentioned here. You know, I am fighting against the woke mob. You know, I'm fighting against skepticism. I'm fighting against anything anybody hears. I'm fighting against bullies. I'm, you know, whatever. But yeah, and I just wanted to make it something like, you know, Mark Gleason and I, you know, we do these more high-tech studio edited, you know, you got to be cleaned up and everything. I just want to have something that's really easy, but unfortunately, Mark Pellegrino, you weren't here when it happened, but my screen kept freezing on me. And so even though I keep saying low-tech, you know, podcast, I got to go upgrade my Wi-Fi for next week because that can't be happening. But yeah, I mean, that's my story. I want to even do other things related to this. Like I want once a month, maybe to have like, what do you call it? I mean, this might be, I don't know how, I came out saying I want to do this podcast thing once a week, you know, at this time, but maybe once a month do a philosophy cafe. Philosophy cafe is just like this, only it's kind of a little bit more structured, where you come in with a planned topic, and you know, there's usually more people, but like we have what, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. This is enough people for a philosophy cafe. So I'm not certain about the format of this going forward. We'll see how it works out. But Mark Gleason also asked earlier, are we going to do these Socratic dialogues? That's a very specific kind of philosophy cafe. So I have a variety of different things I'd like to do. I might occasionally just have 1 or 2 people on, you know, it depends, you know, not everybody can come every week. We'll see. I'm open-minded about it all. But at one point, like when COVID is, you know, when people are comfortable, you know, without social distancing again at some point, I did this once only. They have these things called Ask a Philosopher. It's like a table at a subway station or at a fruit market or something, you know, where, you know, I've done it before where, you know, you have a big sign, Ask a Philosopher, and me and 1 or 2 other philosophers sit at the table, and people just come by and ask you philosophical questions, and you have these discussions. That's like street philosophy, you know. So that's just a couple of the, you know, intentions that I have that are kind of related to what's going on here, but those are my hopes and expectations.
Well, maybe we could submit some topics we'd like to cover. I think we've, you know, I'm not sure if we've adequately covered Michael's question about falsifiability or not. I will say, I don't want to give anybody, you know, a nervous twitch from this, because I'm not sure if we beat this one to death, but I still would like at some point to have a discussion on color. And that conversation is so complicated. And anybody who tells you it's not is not really understanding the issues properly, right? You know, the reflectivity of surfaces, what is real, what is the relationship between the color in your brain versus the light, like, you know, so that whole chain of events. I'm not saying we can't get to the bottom of it, maybe we can, but I had high hopes when we were on Twitter going through it, and it kind of got derailed into, you know, down a very non-useful path. So if you're accepting topics, Rick, color at some point, I'd like to have a conversation about that. I think it really is inherent to what we know. It's a good example for, do we know reality? Are we really seeing reality as it is, or at least part of like it is, or not? And so to me, it's a very central question. So I would love to have that. And then your article, which I'm not sure is published yet, on the cyberbullying and soft bullying and, you know, the gold silver rule, I guess, is another way to say it. You know, the golden rule, treat others as you would be treated. The silver rule is treat them like they treat you. You know, you and I have some daylight there between us, because maybe not, because when someone treats me badly, I certainly am justified to treat them equally as badly, but then at some point I'm compromising my own principles if I do. So what's the right way to deal with the different levels of bullying? including soft bullying, including emotional manipulation, that kind of thing. And then when is it appropriate to the gold and silver rule? How do they apply? When is the silver rule just engaging in an excuse to engage in bad behavior yourself, right? And interestingly enough, there's somebody I was engaging with on Twitter who was not being held accountable to their own spoken ideals. I said, well, this is not a way that somebody who follows your belief system should behave. And they said, oh, well, you don't believe in it anyway, so why should you hold me to that? And I'm like, I'm not holding you to that. You should be holding you to that. It's your belief system, right? But when is that? And I worry about that myself. Okay, if I'm going to engage in the silver rule and someone's going to take a swipe at me and I can do that all day long, no problem. At what point am I compromising my own principles by getting down the mud and rolling in the mud with the pigs, as they say, right? Anyway, so those are my two suggestions. For questions that I feel are unanswered in my mind. I'm not sure if anybody else can open the floor to questions that people are still struggling with, and maybe we could have Rick make a schedule, and then we can have prepared sessions on those.
Idea. Yeah, let's take.
That's
I had a list of topics that I was going to bring in if nobody had any other ones, but I'll just throw them out there quickly. I'd love to have a discussion about, I know like most of you guys here are objectivists, but Ayn Rand's ethical egoism is something that it might be good for us to delve into so that we could understand it better. Certainly, this other issue was about whether or not there can be rational emotions, whether emotions have any cognitive value whatsoever. There was a lot of dispute about that. So that's also, one of those things that got beaten to death like color. But any one of those things that became a big philosophical debate on the thread, I would love to do here, because that's one of the other, I should have said this, that's one of the main reasons why I want to do this podcast. Because in Twitter, you've got the character limits and then the way people react and people get defensive. But when you see people and you're talking to them and you realize we're all in this together, we're friendly, we can have a real philosophical discussion without having to worry about that nonsense that happens in social media, where people just start getting defensive and attacking each other and insulting each other. And then the whole thing is derailed. And then, like somebody said earlier today, it becomes an investigation into your character. And then you're spending more time defending your character and the thing you didn't say, you didn't mean it that way. And people are going to insist it, and then they get their friends to come in and their sock accounts or whatever to come in and say, yeah, that's what you meant. We know you meant that, you lowlife. And then the whole thing is just like a complete waste of time. And then it does not only cut into your me time, but it's not good for your mental health, like to go into those places. So that's the downside of the silver rule thing. So I'm just wanting to embellish on that. And then the other issue is about volition too. Volition is key in objectivism, but can you control your own volitions? This issue, can you control your emotions? Is it smart to control your emotions? Of course it's smart to control your emotions, but we need to have that discussion. We need to have one about volition. Of course, I could talk forever about the difference between, and it just keeps coming up in that thread, the difference between knowledge and certainty, which way the arrows go. If you have knowledge, you usually have certainty, but often when you have certainty, you don't have knowledge. You're just deluded, you're just convicted of your beliefs. So those are some topics I'd like to do. What about other folks?
I had a question for you.
I would definitely like to see also like a thread about, or podcast about art and about view of the world. So
That's awesome, Angel, because that is actually one of the things that I have found so valuable out of that thread. When I got the understanding of that's been huge for me. I think that would be great. And then actually to carry on with that, Mark, you were talking about the conversation about color, and I had to bail on that because it was so over my head. And at one point I said to somebody, I just don't understand how my perception of color applies to my life. And I've told you, I'm super selfish. I'm here to gain the pollens of knowledge and figure out how that helps me in my personal growth. And so if we can't talk about the color thing and figure out how that helps me.
I think the argument sort of stated the moral intent of those who were denying color as as a sort of interaction between an object and your own senses. The one side was claiming you manufacture it. It's an image created by your brain. It's not really related to the outside world at all. It's sort of a construct, and those people go from your perceptions are sort of your own manufacture. And Rick, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Your perceptions are sort of your own manufacture, to your concepts are your own manufacture, to your truths are your own manufacture, to you're guided by mental maps and not necessarily by reality. So nothing, including your truth, from your concepts to your sense of truth, are connected to physical realities around you, to observable facts, because you're not observing facts, you're observing phenomenon, and then your brain is doing things with it that makes it something that isn't in fact existent. And so that's a huge thing, because that tells you whether or not your mind is capable of understanding reality, whether or not your truth is objective, whether or not your choices are objective, what's the origin of good and bad? Is it just a construct of your mind, or is it something that is relatable to what exists? So that, to me, impacts you on almost every level. And so winning that fight with skeptics who think that, you know, everything's just in your head, more or less, is vital to the survival of our fucking civilization, as far as I'm concerned. Do you have anything to say, Rick, about that?
No, yeah, that's a great summary, particularly for Jen. So, like, you know, I think you made that clear for her. You get it now, Jen? What's at stake in that? Hello, can you hear me? My screen froze. Good Lord.
Somebody very close to me just voiced this objection to me the other day, and I was talking about the color debate, and they were saying, what good is this? Like, what useful purpose does this serve? And I said, this is not just a esoteric philosophical question, in the sense that when a wokist, person says to me, you can't know reality. Nobody can know reality. There is no reality. There's only our points of view. They're all equally valid, or some are more valid than others. If I feel that you were being racist toward me, you were, regardless of any kind of objective facts, because nobody can know anything. And this is what skepticism is. It is the skeptic argument that says you can't know anything anyway, therefore blank, right? Usually it's therefore do all these things that I want you to do. And so one of the critical, there's a conversation that has occurred over centuries now about what do we know and how do we know it. And one of those conversation threads is on color, which is I see the color, it's in my brain, right? It goes in, I think I see that color, but does color really exist, or is it in my brain? And so this relationship between you and reality is why it impacts you, because if you know that clearly, then when someone comes and gives you some of the shenanigan arguments that skeptics will use, and by the way, they're very difficult to overcome. I mean, unless you prepared for them, when someone comes to you and you say, well, no, I think this is right. And they go, no, how do you know that? And they start hitting you with these skeptical arguments that you really can't know anything anyway, like the brain in the vat, right? Well, how prove to me that you're not a brain in the vat? And if you can't prove that, you can't prove anything.
Wasn't that, didn't Adrian do that just recently? Adrian, that twat.
Probably, right? So unless you know how to answer those, and by the way, the answer is pretty easy when you know the answer, but if you're a good person trying to reason your way out of it, you get lost in a labyrinth. I have myself, right? So that's why I'm interested in that question on color, because it doesn't need to be a long conversation, but it needs to be clear of what we're defining and how we're defining it, so that the next time I'm in one of those conversations, and the next time the skeptic says you can't even know anything because color doesn't exist, just in your mind, and it's this and it's that I have a very crystal clear idea about my relationship with reality and how I know what I know. And so it doesn't have to be color, but it's one of the ones that I was left feeling unsatisfied by the change, and I want to clarify. I have my own ideas on it, but I was really interested in the topic, and there were some really good points brought up. And unfortunately, it just got watered down with nonsense. So I'd like to do an exchange on it if we could.
I think it would be great, because it's something that I think I understand the objectivist answer to the problem of where colors exist. But but I could use to have that sharpened in my understanding too, for the exact same reasons, because skeptics definitely use color as the primary way to disconnect you from the reality that you're perceiving. That's the appearance reality gap. You know, the world is filled with color and sound, but the skeptic will tell you, no, color and sound, no, there's vibrations out there, but color and sound is all in your head. Right. And so you divorce from reality. So if you divorce from reality, anything goes. And then it's ironically, our narrative is better than your narrative, even though as postmodernists, we're suspicious of all narratives except our own,
And it's getting louder.
Yes.
Like all these voices, and especially amplified by people who have huge followings, that the followers just are like, oh, I love that, you know, songwriter, so I subscribe to what he says, even though I haven't thought it through.
It's a race to the bottom. Once you abandon reason, right? It's a race to the bottom.
Reality.
The louder ones dominate, and then the more violent ones dominate, and it's a race to the bottom once you abandon reason. So we have to hold the line, but we have to have good arguments to hold the line. That's all we have. Like Mark P was saying, they have everything. They have the institutions, right? They have the media, they have academia, they have Hollywood, they have literally everything. So we need to be very clear on the truth, which is the nature of reality, and crystal clear. So that, and by the way, Jen, so also that we can make the argument we need to make cleanly without getting emotionally bogged down in it as well, right? Like there's nothing more frustrating for me, for instance, to be in an argument where I know I'm right. I know they're being evasive. I just can't think of the argument to cleanly cut through it and nail them down, right? And I'm like, no, I know this. I know I have the answer here. I gotta go find it. So when you have that clean answer and they give you that nonsense and you just go, nope, it's like this. And they can rail against it all they want, but everybody can kind of see that this is the truth of it, right to the heart of the matter. Then you can spread truth without a lot of emotional cost to yourself. And I think that's important in this fight.
One of the things about the woke ideology, as I'll call it, which ties into what Michael asked about at the beginning of the podcast today, which was about what is falsifiability criterion for scientific hypothesis? How does that work? How does that, how do we understand that? The critical race theory is unfalsifiable, because if you deny it, that's proof that you're guilty of the accusation of you being a racist, let's just say.
If I wanted to step in and be PVN, the enemy, for a little bit,
Sure.
He would say it's unprovable, right? And this idea of unfalsifiability, the falsifiability comes at a knowledge from a skeptic's perspective. In that respect, I totally agree with him. That it's that you can only know what you don't know, as opposed to what is just provisional and could shift and change, and you can't say you know it for sure. I say critical race theory is unprovable.
I'm fine with that. I've always thought that I never really understood why scientists or philosophers sort of seem to forget about the positive side of confirmation. They focus on disconfirmation. I guess because if you can't imagine a test, an experiment, or an observation under which a theory could be falsified, then the theory is meaningless. But by the same token, if you can't imagine a circumstance under which it could be proven to be true, it's also meaningless. So it should be verifiable or falsifiable, the criterion in my mind.
Well, I viewed it.
The point is, it's from this positivist attitude about, the life affirming, happiness affirming, self affirming, all those values in objectivism. I could see why they would want to focus on knowledge affirming rather than, ignorance rejecting. So I get that. But I think at a kind of deeper conceptual level, if you want to know whether or not a proposition or hypothesis is even cognitively meaningful, both of those criteria matter. Can it be proven or disproven? Either one of them. If it can't do either of them, then it's cognitively meaningless. So that would
Okay.
at least eliminate a whole category of things like brain in a vat hypothesis, all these different things. They're cognitively meaningless, so we shouldn't worry about them. The skeptics think that those are grounds for an argument for skepticism. They're not. They're cognitively meaningless.
And that's throwing out the baby with the bathwater, in my opinion. Exactly right. So if you throw out falsifiability, you throw out the bounding. Falsifiability, like we were saying in the beginning, is I'm just giving a theory that may or may not be right, but where is it bounded? Where's the bounding of this theory and its predictive power of how reality functions? If you throw that out, then you say, then any theory is equally valid, right? Pretty much, because you can't falsify any of them. And so the brain in the vat, you have no answer to the brain in the vat hypothesis, because you don't have the answer to say, well, it can't be falsified, therefore it's not cognitively meaningful, right? If you remove that from your arsenal, I'm all for being positive, but there's nothing wrong with saying, here's my claim, and then here are the bounds to my claim, and here are the ways my claim can be proved false if my claim is incorrect, right?
Well, so, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the example I gave earlier, where evolution says, if you find one Precambrian rabbit, one rabbit anywhere in the Precambrian layer of soil, then we have to redefine the entire theory, right? And as those kinds of, the more rigorous you set the limits on your theory, the more impressive it is, the more impressive your understanding of reality is, and the more impressive your model is when it ends up being true, right? So it's a way of bounding with some rigor your pie in the sky hypothesis. And people who would like to be pie in the sky don't like rigor. They like to be pie in the sky and they never can be nailed down on anything. And by the way, they never get you wrong about anything. So it works out very well for them. But the predictive power of their theories are pretty useless then. Theories are only useful when you can bound them in some way to show whether or not your model is correct in its predictive power. I'm sorry, Michael, continue.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I just think it's a false dichotomy to say something is falsifiable versus provable. I think I actually don't even like the word falsifiable, and that's why I brought the topic up in the first place, is because I've never quite understood the concept. I just think of it as you either have a testable hypothesis or you don't. That's the way I look at it. It's not testable to know that you have a brain in the vat, therefore it's simply arbitrary. And then when you say something is provable, or even if you determine something to be true, by definition, you've falsified anything that contradicts it. So it's like it's like I don't get hung up on whether or not I think you're trying to find what corresponds to reality, and when you have, then if you have a proposition that corresponds to reality, then anything that contradicts that proposition is thereby falsified, right? Or if you want to use that word, not true. So,
well, like we were saying in the beginning with my example from Carl Sagan's dragon, right? It's a different thing to say, I think my theory is all swans are white, and my theory will be rendered null and void if we ever find a black swan, right? But based on all the evidence, my theory is there's only white swans. But you're building into that claim the ways that it can be disproven if incorrect, right? And there's a fundamental difference to that prediction than my dragon thing, which is there's a floating invisible dragon that nobody could ever see, measure, or see, or touch, but it's there in my garage, right? Maybe there is, but because I have not bounded it in any way, it is cognitively meaningless. It's just some wild claim, which, by the way, people are prone to making wild claims, right? Every single day, they just make wild claims about things they say are true, which are not bounded in any way, and therefore they're kind of useless. So I think the mechanism of bounding claims is important, and we can put a spin on it that's positive or a spin on it that's negative. But like you, I think it's a false dichotomy. I think either way, claims need to be bounded in order to be useful.
That
reminds me.
Summary of testable, by the way, because that includes verifiable or falsifiable, to be confirmed or disconfirmed. If it can't be either, then it's not testable. So testable includes both modes.
Right,
but if something's disconfirmed, then it's true that it's disconfirmed.
That's true.
The problem with that is it doesn't tell you what's real, what is reality. It just gives you one. You've just ruled out one thing in a set of you don't know how many.
And isn't it true that the reason it's structured this way, right, is because, like you said earlier, if I have a hypothesis, I make a test, and that test comes out valid, then it doesn't prove my theory is correct. It just fails to prove it's incorrect, right? And yes, that could be a negativist way of looking at it, but that is how reality functions, right? If it is true that if I go look for a black swan and don't find one, I have so far not found any evidence to contradict my hypothesis, right? It doesn't mean because I failed to find a black swan, my theory is automatically correct. I've just failed to prove it wrong. But that's the nature of logic, right? And reality and knowledge is that we're always awaiting more evidence, right? Doesn't mean we can't be contextually certain about our knowledge. It just means if a black swan arrives one day, we can say, well, given this new context, I can now say this theory is different, right?
I'm reminded of the I was thinking about when you were talking about that, this is kind of an old joke, but I don't know, some of you guys are probably too young to remember this, but when Mike Tyson bit off Evander Holyfield's ear, and the joke was that the ref didn't see it, and he said, "You can't prove it because you didn't see it." And he says, "Well, I saw him spit it out, so there's that."
Ah,
That's right. You can't prove it. Occam's razor. Well, like the you wake up, there's snow all over the ground, and how do you know elves didn't come and artificially lay the snow over your yard, right? But you have to go with Occam's razor.
Yeah. So, Angel, when you said art before, my screen went blank, and I want to make sure I get notes on topics. Did you give another topic also?
I mean, I mentioned art, but I was thinking about it. Another thing that I think it would be good to do a podcast on is really the rules of debate, how to form opinions and how to present opinions. I mean, I've heard that like there's a list of things that you should avoid doing in debates and stuff, but I haven't really learned all of them. And I think that would be good too.
That's a good
I
topic.
think James Lindsay and
Peter Boghossian.
Peter Boghossian have written a book called How to Have Impossible Conversations that gives a set of very good guidelines for having discussions with people about difficult things. I don't think James follows his own advice though on his Twitter.
Not on Twitter. No, he doesn't. He definitely doesn't follow it.
Not at all.
He's king of your mom.
But I think yeah. I think he's had
Following
it.
your own advice is one of the hardest things.
Well, but I think he's just had it. I think he's been attacked by the woke mob, and he's like, fuck it, these people play unfair. They're trying to tear my ears off, gouge out my eyes, castrate me. I'm gonna hit him where it hurts. I don't blame him.
Yeah, he's a clear example of the application of my silver rule. Treat others the way they treat you. But yeah, it does have its downside because that kind of calls into question, how deeply he integrates his own advice into his own life.
Yeah, I agree with
Makes him
the
happy.
silver rule too, but it does get you into trouble.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great topic though. Rules of debate. Mark has a lot to say about. Mark Gleason has a lot to say about.
Near and dear to my heart. Rappaport's rules of debate is the one I like, which is be able to articulate somebody's position before you criticize it, which is why I ask questions.
So you sort of steel man the other guy's point of view and then go from there. That is very good. That is a very good way to do it.
The goal is to be able to articulate their position better than they can before you criticize, right? And that's just kind of you let me understand it and let me steel man it, and to the point where I can just articulate it and they go, yes, that's it, that's what I mean. And then and only then can you criticize. Now
I like that. That's good on so many different levels. I can't even tell you.
Yeah. And it's the opposite of straw man. It's the direct opposite of straw man. And straw man, unfortunately, is like I think the most metastasized sophistry disease on Twitter that we come across almost every day. Straw man.
Oh, yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, though, when I pursued this, 'cause I figured that this is bulletproof. There's no way I can go wrong with Rappaport's rules. You question, and then you understand, and you articulate back, and you steel man, and then you criticize. So I start asking questions on Twitter about, okay, well, how do you feel about this? Well, how did you arrive at that? And then I get labeled a skeptic because I'm asking questions, because skeptics ask questions, right? And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to understand your position so that I can fully understand it before I criticize it. And they're like, no, you're a skeptic for asking questions. So I thought it was bulletproof. I've learned it's not quite bulletproof. You do need an answer when they turn around and reprimand you for asking too many questions.
You know, I wrote a book review about the book that Mark Pellegrino mentioned, but with
Oh, really?
and Peter Book, yeah, on how to have impossible conversations. But it didn't get published because the journal that was going to publish it just kept holding off. Like they accepted it, and like the editor complained to me after I kept pressing him that the publishers had just been AWOL and they haven't been responding. And like Peter, I'm friends with Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, and they said, no, keep it with them. You know, they already accepted it, and we waited too long, and now it's like the book is already over, like 2 years old or something. And you know, when I wrote it for them, they didn't have like a kind of small word count. A lot of book reviews are restricted, so I wrote a pretty in-depth one. Because I had written another one for Peter Boghossian on an earlier book of his, A Manual for Creating Atheists, which was a kind of militant atheist.
Oh, yeah, that's his thing. Yeah.
I wrote a book review about that. That got published in the same journal. So, but in any event, the article's now sitting on a shelf, but I'd be happy to share it with you guys if you want to read the review before reading the book. But I also wrote an article that got published in Quillette magazine.
I love Quillette.
Yeah, I have an article in there about steel manning and straw manning and like viewpoint Manichaeanism. It's all about this kind of disgusting embroglio that we always get into. The article's all about that. I'll share it with you guys, especially before we have that as our topic. We should have a topic on that, the Rappaport's rules and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, we talked about having for a while now, since the holidays, about having Mark P. and James Lindsay on a podcast all together.
Yeah. And he agreed to do it, James.
We never really nailed down the topic exactly, but this whole topic of how to deal with people would be I would like both Mark P.'s and Lindsay's views on.
Yeah. No, let's try and set that up now, because we kept playing time tag with him, you know, dates, it kept working, not working, would postpone and whatever. And we just stopped bothering him. Like, he's a very busy guy, but let's try that. Yeah, I'm going to try that again.
Took a long time for him to follow me, not to get off track and talk about myself, but it took a long time for him to follow me. And I was saying for months that he was the most important intellectual on Twitter at the time. Right, because I thought he was saying exactly what needed to be said. He knew the literature, the critical theory literature, so deeply, and he's giving that to me. It's like a gift. I mean, he did a four episode stint on New Discourses where he read Herbert Marcuse's Repressive Tolerance. He actually read it and then critiqued every line, basically. I mean, it was like a 5-hour course, but it's pretty interesting. I came to different conclusions than he did about some of the things, and it would be interesting to talk about that with him, because I found that it's a recipe for just. You guys know Repressive Tolerance at all?
I've listened to those podcasts. I think it's the most important podcast he's done on New Discourses yet.
I thought so too. I don't remember if he came to this conclusion. I was listening to it on the road up here. I mean, for me, it's a formula for incessant revolution, because he tried to make it a deal about the right and the left and repressing the right for the sake of the left. But it seemed like Marcuse's idea was the right is just whatever party happens to be in power and they're trying to maintain power, and the left is the minority who's outside the loop and they're the ones who are trying to agitate. Well, eventually the left becomes the right because they gain institutional power. Then they try to do the very things of maintaining that power that the previous right did. So they become the right in a sense, and then it's like a constant regeneration of violence, right? Violence and dominance. Like once one side becomes ascendant, something comes from beneath it and unseats it, takes its place, and then like this, a secular kind of violence. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he, in I think the second episode, he's kept saying, look, they're doing the same thing. They're accusing them of it, and Marcuse is dead now. And one of the questions that comes out of the podcast that Lindsay even asked was, would he have recognized that the type of kind of revolution and the tactics that he supported that are being used by the far left, that they have sort of become would he have thought, if he were here today, would he have thought that the people that are sort of following his rule book, so to speak, if they would he say that they have become that which he set out to oppose through revolution? They have all the institutional power, as I don't remember who said that, but so you have the people with the institutional power are the ones who gain from the revolution and who have this sort of incestuous relationship with it, and out of that comes this idea that asymmetry is the story. You'll hear him say, which is why, for example, you'll see all the riots happen in 2020 as a result of the George Floyd thing. And then you see what happened on January 6th at the Capitol, and you see a completely different sort of application of outrage and a completely different conclusion from the people that really have the institutional power, whether that's the legacy media or Hollywood or Twitter blue checks, whatever. And that's all part of repressive tolerance. And anyway, it's like it is a perfect window into the culture wars we're having today. Is that 4-part series? Maybe I can find it and share it on here. But if you just go to newdiscourses.com, we're living it basically. It's crazy. And that was written in the 1950s, maybe?
No, 60s.
60s, okay. Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting about James Lindsay is if you read critical theories, or if you listen to some of his podcasts or read some of the articles, is he does point out that there are a lot of the things that he's fighting against, there is good in them, right? Like they may have points, they definitely have a point here, they have a point there, but they're coming at it, their approach is not a way to solve what they claim is the problem, assuming that that's kind of, give them the credit that that's their goal, is just kind of solve this thing, or is the problem that they pose really just sort of a means to kind of another end. But he does seem pretty charitable a lot of times with his sort of political, I guess his political enemies, I say, but really he's an intellectual, and he's a professor as well, right? And so he's really kind of arguing against not necessarily all of the Twitter people.
A member of any tribe you're a member of, there's this tension between the individual and the tribe. And I think that cyclical thing that happens, it happens everywhere. It doesn't matter what tribe you're a part of. There's leaders to that tribe. Those leaders need to motivate action in some way. So when the left gets into power, the right now needs to use many of the same mechanisms to motivate their base to rise up against the power. That means all the same emotional triggers. It means, abandoning the rational arguments and going straight for the emotional ones. It means the extreme tribalism of good and evil. We're the good, they're the evil. They need to be opposed and destroyed. So
And there was also the paradoxical notion of tolerance with tolerating the supporters of slavery is something that we can all universally say, well, that's a terrible thing to do, and we probably shouldn't do it. In that case, tolerance is a horrible thing. But he had that paradoxical notion in there as well.
Yeah, that was from Popper, I think. It was Karl Popper's the paradox of tolerance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he read that as a separate page?
They, whether or not the I guess the anarchists are meeting that test, if or is that a good rule, etc. And the question you asked before was about like kind of the perpetual thing.
Yeah.
I think it is perpetual in the sense that, ultimately there's this sort of utopia that is the goal, but since you never really get to utopia and there's a high body count along the way, it is perpetual, right? You're trying to get rid of, you're fighting against any institutional power, because ultimately you want to have this sort of, I don't know if it's like an anarcho-communist type thing, but it's like he talked about the, at the end of the communist, rainbow, essentially, which you never really get to. And that's why it's a perpetual sort of agitation.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think that when you said James is charitable, he, not on Twitter, but when he's lecturing and giving presentations or whatever else, or writing his articles and books, he's using Rappaport's rules. He's following his own advice in how to have difficult conversations. That book of his.
Well, he would be something other than human if he were able to follow those rules on Twitter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no,
especially with the amount of flack he gets because of his stance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like being a pacifist, but you're a martial arts expert, and you after enough times that somebody keeps trying to kick you in the shins, you just kind of you want to sweep their leg and let them fall and bang their head on the concrete. You could be a pacifist, but that doesn't mean you should let people abuse you.
Right.
Well, I think the issue is that he knows the ideology better than the adherents, and especially those that are on Twitter, because not everybody that's pushing critical theory really understands it. They're really sort of latching on to something, and who knows why, because people don't have jobs, because people got a bunch of school debt and they're looking for some meaning, whatever.
Yeah.
But I know people who are, they have some of the woke talking points, and it's just like, they're not evil people. They don't understand the source of this ideology, and he knows it better than everybody except the proponents of it. And so he doesn't really, I don't think he has a lot of patience for all of the ankle biters on Twitter who don't have the same sort of, this goes back to when I talked about the intentionality of, not just, it's just not about what's true and false. It's about like, do you have the intentionality to kind of know, do I believe this because it's, it is true? I want to know what is true, even if it's uncomfortable. And he knows that, and his critics don't. And I just don't think he has patience for it, and it shows.
Right.
Helen Pluckrose also knows that stuff just as well as him. They worked together with Peter Boghossian on that grievance.
She's great,
which was phenomenal.
She's great, but she doesn't really get out there too much. I don't think she doesn't dig the controversy the way Lindsay does.
Yeah, no, yeah, she's much more guarded on Twitter anyway. She tries to be neutral about lots of stuff, and she's self-effacing humor and stuff, but she tries not to, duke it out with people as much as.
And I think, when James went over to the Trump camp, that didn't help things between the two of them. And a lot of people tried to divide them because of his faux pas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably explains it.
Guys, I got a jet.
Yeah,
But
great. Thanks for showing up, man.
yeah, man. But I'll stay longer next time and come on time. So just keep me informed as to what the assignment is.
Yeah, we've got some topics, and maybe we'll figure out which one we want to do next after you leave.
Okay, great to see you guys.
Likewise.
Take care, Mark.
Peace.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, so anybody else want to bring a topic? Did everybody make a suggestion, or is there something anybody else might want to think about next time around?
I'm interested to know if we've scared away the other half from joining Twitter.
No, not quite. Yeah, that's something we're definitely going to try to tackle on and get involved in very much so.
I think for us, it's a lot of it's really good for us to hear this discourse and just this conversation, because it helps us prepare on how, and even give us some ideas on how we want to tackle our own podcast. I'm glad you actually spoke, Jen. I wanted to ask you a question earlier because you brought up inner peace, and you mentioned that that for some people it's not their goal.
Yeah.
They have a higher goal. Because they haven't, it could be that they have not achieved that higher goal. My question is that, do you believe that, and it's for everyone actually, do you believe that they have already achieved inner peace and they have achieved this higher goal? That's why they are pursuing that? Or is it that they have like, they don't care about the inner peace? That's something they have forgotten, and then they are passionate about something else, and that's why they're, arguing, or they're even going the extra mile to forego their own inner peace and debate a topic that they care about more. That makes sense?
I think for me, I think it depends on the individual, and I think it depends on what peace means to you. So one of the more vocal people in that Twitter thread, who is always right, just thinks he's always right. I think for him, peace means getting everyone to buy into his philosophy. He will not be at peace until that happens. So I don't even think it's achievable. In his lifetime, I just don't see that happening. But I have to, and I feel like with these people in the thread, there's got to be people who their biggest value is to bring the message to the masses. Mark Pellegrino even just said it. He's like, I want to be part of the revolution. And Rick R, is an educator. Like, that's just it's in him to educate. So I just think it depends on the person, and then also what their piece means to them.
How about the rest of you guys? Do you think it's people who are passionate about something is because they have determined that, okay, this on this topic, like, is that their inner peace, that if they keep arguing about a certain topic, that's how they achieve their inner peace? Or is it because they have achieved an understanding, now they want to go out there and spread that knowledge? Or
I think it really depends on whether their goal is, whether their actions on the thread are positive or negative. Like, I think some people have a very empty hole inside of them, and they look to social media to fill it, whether it's with entertaining themselves with other people's anger, or they want people's adoration or love, or they want to see how loyal people are to them. But and I think different people come to threads with different issues or different, like some people that are so bullying and so mean, they do have, mental illnesses. They do have personal tragedies that drive them to act that way. And it's very difficult to, to understand sometimes why people do those things, but I think it doesn't excuse their behavior. But there's different reasons why people act that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words, and then, whoever else wants to, it'd be good to hear what everybody thinks about this. But I think that Angel and Jen already hit the nail on the head, saying it depends on the individual, and like there's no one answer for everybody. And like there's a way in which when Niaz, when you say, what do you think their motive is, or their value, or their end game, that involves what some in the thread, I forget who invented this term. Was it you, Mark? I don't know. Motive whisperer. We call it motive whispering, when a lot of times, unfortunately, in the thread that we keep referring to, people accuse each other of having motives that they probably don't have. And, so we started calling that motive whispering. But like, how can we say what people's motives are? I mean, we can look at their ostensive behavior and pretty much get a good idea of what some of those motives might be. But, and this is not me being afraid to embrace things as true knowledge. It's just like, well, we really don't know what people's motives are. And then like, especially when, people in like a lot of these threads that we're referring to, we don't even know who they really are. They don't even have a picture of themselves. They have some kind of nickname. And, some of them are even just like sock accounts. They're like fake accounts from somebody else in the thread. And, and there might be somebody who even has 3 or 4 of them, and then they use them to create the kind of impression that everybody does agree with them, even when they don't. Like, and, who knows what's going on, what people's motives are. That depends on the person. And I think one of the good clues that Angel mentioned was you can sense if they're coming from a positive or a negative place. Are they there to learn and contribute and just be a part of a conversation, or are they there to kind of stir up shit and enjoy the negative fallout? But it's not as simple as just that. Everybody's different. Like, some people just want to hear what other people have to say about emotion or whatever. And so, and that helps them to think more about it. Everybody's different. That's my answer. So I think my answer is the same as Angel's and Jen's. It depends. It depends. Mark, Michael, and Mike.
Well, my view is, look, wherever you go, there you are, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're going to the store, whether you're in the Twitter thread, whether you're talking to your family at Thanksgiving, you're bringing all of your issues to the table. And I think Ayn Rand, in her Psychology of Pleasure and the Virtue of Selfishness, there's a chapter called The Psychology of Pleasure. And it is just fantastic philosophy, in my opinion. And it's the most insightful philosophy I've ever read. And basically what that says is, and by the way, when Angel brought up art, I think this is very relevant to this. What Rand's position is, you know everything about somebody by the kind of art they like, right? Because art speaks directly to your values, right? Whether you like humanity as aspirational, being lifted up, or whether you like a view of humanity as being crushed and living a miserable existence, what appeals to you, it speaks to your values. And certainly what you're going to get out of anything, including a Twitter thread, is going to speak to your values. What are you there for? What is motivating you, right? Now, and she even says, like, if you choose your sexual choices are the same way, that the person that you choose, you can choose a person of esteem who holds you accountable, who has very high standards for themselves and for you. And you can choose this person as a spiritual equal to love and admire. And there's a certain kind of person who does that. And then there's the person who doesn't want that. They want to be surrounded by a romantic partner or friends who they're insecure. And when they find somebody who kind of shores up that insecurity, then that's who they choose, right? And so you're not choosing somebody essentially for their virtues. You're choosing somebody almost that you compare favorably to. So, I'm self-conscious because I, didn't succeed in life, but I find some romantic partner who's even more of a mess than I do. I knew I have friends that way, where his whole life was a mess, but he'd come home and yell at her because she couldn't balance the checkbook. And they did this every single month. And there's this weird codependent dynamic that was occurring. And it's because, and both of them got something out of it. Both of them, were feeding a part of themselves that was missing, and they got this codependent relationship going, and they filled the gap. So you see that on display on Twitter constantly, right? You see the people who are coming, who are already fairly, they're looking to get knowledge or peace or exchange of ideas. And you see people who are looking to fill a hole in themselves. I think somebody else said that as well. And it's so true. And we all create these patterns in our lives, right? And the fascinating thing about Twitter is you see it play out. So you have people who have a story in their head. Everybody betrays you. You can't trust anybody. Everybody betrays you. And then they are constantly doing these loyalty tests, and they're ratcheting up the stakes of these loyalty tests. And so that the moment that person finally leaves them, they can go, aha, see, people leave you all the time. And so they have these stories, and it's not just on Twitter. We all do this in our lives, right? I have a buddy of mine, and he always thinks that business partners will always screw you over, and they inevitably do because of how he behaves. And I know a friend of mine who's a girl who
I know that guy.
who thinks there's no good guys out there. They all treat you horribly. They're all going to cheat on you, right? And she behaves like a maniac whenever she's dating anybody, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think everybody, wherever you go, there you are. People bring all their good traits and all their bad traits wherever they go. That's kind of honestly part of the human watching I do on that Twitter thread, is seeing the psychology of people play out in ways that in my personal life, if I was going to observe them and engage, it might be disastrous. But because it's on Twitter, it's just still disastrous, but it just doesn't have all this full impact as if I was doing it at the Thanksgiving table.
It's in between watching a disastrous film and living in the disastrous life. It's Twitter. It's kind of in between.
Well, you feel for these people, right? I can't even get that worked up over it. I mean, these people are in pain. They're obviously in pain. They're bound and determined to keep themselves in pain, and nothing you can do to kind of slice through it is really making an impact. Philosophy is entirely the answer. It is their way of thinking that is perpetuating these cycles, and that they're going to continue in forever until you change the way you think and you change your philosophy and your values. And over time, you'll change your emotions as well. Jen, going back to our emotion conversation, your values drive your emotions. So it's more important for people who feel like, they in my family as well, we have some my father has struggled with depression and whatnot. So it's even more important that you be very rigid in your thinking and your values to know what you stand for, even on those days you don't feel like standing for it. All right, but you gotta know that you do. Anyway, so I have more sympathy than anything else for the people who are openly struggling on social media. And I wish I could help them sometimes, right? You're offering up like, look, this is just what you need to do. Here you go. And they slap it away, right? And say, how dare you, think you're better than I am, or whatever it is, whatever story they got going on.
Nobody asked for your help.
That's right. That's right. So look, I'm an objectivist, so I don't feel like I need to be a savior for anybody, but certainly if I want to live I selfishly want to live in the kind of society where we help people who struggle. So I want people to help me if I struggle, and I want other people I want to help other people as well. So, but only if they want to be helped. My God, I certainly don't want to help people who don't want to be helped. That's for sure.
Michael?
You may have noticed that I'm not on that thread anymore. I've just sort of backed away, and that to me has brought me closer to inner peace than away from it. So I just don't get any value out of it anymore. It's just too contentious and just too much. I don't know. I just feel like it's just unnecessary, because the people on that thread probably agree on most things. And then the one thing that they disagree with, which might be it gets blown out of proportion to, well, if you don't agree with that, then you're a skeptic. If you're a skeptic, then you're going to be a socialist. If you're a socialist, you're going to be a communist, and you're going to destroy the world, and then we're all going to be dead. It's just like, how about they're just wrong, and that's okay too, right? Like, I don't like the whole, like, if you don't agree with this one minute little point about the epistemological status of color, then that's the gateway drug to Stalin. It's just like, I'm not saying anyone said that necessarily, particularly.
Yeah, they did.
But
They said the same thing about, I have a very positive attitude towards doubt, but I am not a skeptic. doubt rescued me from various false ideologies and from false teachers because I was able to doubt them. So I think doubt is a great thing when you're under false beliefs. If you start having a doubt about it, but then that became a huge debate because doubt is the gateway to skepticism. There's got to be a more knowledge positive way of having what we don't even want to call doubt. And let's make believe they're not the same thing, right? That was ridiculous, that debate. I'm sorry, but that's just my
Yeah.
since a few of us have ranted a few times today. That was my quick rant.
Yeah, so I would just say that I have been focusing on other things. I'm on Twitter, sometimes I like to focus on, I get my news from there. I like to rant about critical race theory and then go do something else. Get ready to play some more golf maybe once the weather warms up a little.
Michael, I accidentally outed your Twitter handle at the beginning of the podcast before you were here. So do you need Rick to censor that when he posts this?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's fine. Thank you. It's all good.
Yeah. At first, we were trying to see if we knew who was based on Twitter handles and phone numbers and things coming up. At first, it wasn't obvious.
I'm pretty sure the people, if anyone's that wasn't here today and is watching, are you recording this, by the way?
I am. That's what a podcast is. It gets
Yeah.
recorded.
Well, the part where your screen was froze is probably going to be. You'll have to fill that with the old red and blue, the colored lines like on TV when it kind of.
Emergency broadcast system.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
But
maybe Mark or Mike over there. Mike is Niaz's technical helper over there. Somebody could help me figure that out. But between now and next week, I have to get better Wi-Fi is what it is. And
I would suggest just hardware. Do you get a long Ethernet cable and just plug in your are you on your laptop?
I'm in my laptop, yeah.
Yeah. Just do you have Ethernet port? Then you just use a Ethernet port. It's going to be a solid.
I think I have on my new Apple device.
You didn't have that.
I don't have an Ethernet port. It doesn't even have USB ports. It has this little thing that looks like what you plug your iPhone into your
Thunderbolt.
USB-C.
Yeah, whatever it's called. It's got it's. I'll figure it out though.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll figure it out.
I'll give you some.
Yeah, we'll figure something out
we'll
for you.
figure something
Yeah.
out for you.
Yeah, you guys will help me. Between you and Mark LTP, my other IT genius. Mike, did you want to answer the question that your buddy over there, Niaz, asked?
I mean, it depends on the inner piece of particular topics. With Twitter, I have a hard time grasping the concept of how somebody is actually portraying their words. If you actually look at my bio, I actually am not a strong reader at all. So with inner peace, I believe that everybody has a particular peak. Some people chase a particular high. There's variables on every single content. You can be in the top of the Himalayas and have the best moment, and you can relive that moment, but with a slight rain, you might see a magnificent rainbow, even though you endured some dampness to your body or whatnot. It's the different variables for inner peace, and people want to achieve that. And I think with all the variables and as time goes by, there's never going to be an actual inner peace in any substantial way. You might have it at the moment, and hopefully you can absorb by memory everything, but I don't think that there is inner peace that can be reached for anybody.
Wow, there's a new topic.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a deeper question. Is inner peace ever really attainable? Oh, who wrote the topics there? In the chat?
That was me, sir. I was acting as acting secretary for this phase. I think we still need Miss Angel to weigh in on the question as well, right? Or no?
No, she answered the question.
How about Diaz answering his own question?
Niaz, yeah.
I actually, the reason that, I mean, Rick knows this, the reason that I am totally Twitter idiot, because you guys ever seen the movie Tron? They made this back in the 80s and they made a new one and in the last decade. There's a line that says that you can't. The only way to win the game sometime is to not play the game. I remember being very motivated and especially posting political stuff on Facebook, and especially during the Me Too era movement. There's I posted something about Louis C.K. and it was just the whole woke mob coming after me about it. And I was like, didn't defend the guy, just pointing out that there's two different scenarios. There's Weinstein and there's Louis C.K. Two different scenarios that are happening here. And after that, I was like, yeah, it just takes up way too much of my time. My inner peace was experiencing things in real life, having honest, debates with people, not someone hiding behind a, computer screen and just wailing on you, and not having an intellectual debate. So I have just completely avoided social media. And Rick knows this because both he and my friend Greta, his daughter, would post photos of ourselves, and I would not know about it for months. I would just ignore that whole world. So it goes in both hands. I think my higher value was being passionate about some of these topics that I want to debate, but having the inner peace of not doing it with the whole world, but with people that I thought would give me intellectual feedback or have an intellectual debate, not just fight for the sake of fighting. And often what we're fighting about gets lost, and they're just doing it because, as Angel said, they might have a deeper hole that they're trying to feel inside them, and that's what they're fighting about ultimately, not about what we're discussing. But given that Mike and I are starting this podcast, I appreciate all your feedback for us to get up to date with the modern world and get back on Twitter. And thank you for all of your answers.
All right, folks. Well, we've gone for really 2.5 hours. I think we should call it a day. It was great.
Thanks for organizing. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
My pleasure.
And
yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, we'll see who shows up next time. But Mark Pellegrino will be there on time next time. Poor Ellie had to leave. She didn't get a chance to say goodbye, but it was 6 a.m. in Australia when she logged in. Oh, poor thing.
Yeah.
That's dedication.
Yeah, I guess she had to go have breakfast and get her day started.
So Rick, so are you going to help us choose a topic for next week so we know?
Oh, well, geez.
No, I mean, you don't need to decide right now. I'm just asking if before next Sunday we will have a topic sent out.
Yeah. I'll communicate with all of you about it. Maybe since these two folks are not on Twitter, maybe everybody should send me but meanwhile, it might be better because I'm not that good with Twitter technology, as people have, rubbed in my face on numerous occasions in Twitter. If everybody here who wants to continue with this, PM me in Twitter and send me your email address. And I have Niaz's email address, and then I could just make a group email, and then we could all chit chat about it. We could vote on a topic or whatever, and we'll figure out the topic by next week.
Okay,
all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, so point of order, Senator, point of order. That's fine. I'm just pointing out that if everybody gives you their email addresses and you send it out openly, then everybody will have everybody else's email addresses.
No, I'll do BCCs.
Which I am totally fine with, but if you're going to BCC it, if you want to keep those private.
Yeah, otherwise I'll be doxing people again.
I'm just saying.
Niaz, there's a funny backstory about that. I think the rest of them, Mike might not know. Michael might not.
I did see that.
Okay.
Yeah. And apologize for I said Diaz and it's
okay.
Niaz. It's my bad.
It's Diaz with the N.
Diaz with an N.
Okay.
Okay. Great meeting you guys in the flesh. Well, in the Zoom flesh.
All right. Well, everybody take care.
Be in touch. Take care.
Have a nice Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Jeff.